All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the honor of being joined by Deborah O'Malley. Deborah, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good.
Glad to
Thanks for
have you
having me
here.
on, Mark.
Oh, just been so excited to have you on because for many years we've collaborated on many fronts, and you are always sharing so much knowledge out there. And I wanted to make sure people understood your path, your journey, how you got to where you are. So could you just tell us, what is your current role in the industry and describe your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the industry far longer than I'd like to admit because it makes me sound really old. But it's going on about 2 decades now, quite honestly, which is hard to believe. And I am considered an industry leading CRO and A/B testing expert. And I wasn't always that. It certainly didn't start out that way. In fact, it's been this very difficult wall that I've had to climb with lots of slips and people in the top of the industry pushing me down. It was a very male-dominated industry, not to slight any males, but when I first entered and they didn't want a female being in experimentation. And in fact, it wasn't even called experimentation back then. It was conversion rate optimization or CRO or CO. Nobody could even agree on the name. And even still today, it's conversion rate optimization and optimization with an S or a Z or a Z, depending on where you live in the world. And so there's still no consensus. But the industry has matured a little bit, and women are allowed to be in the industry and be at the helm of it. And it's seen a lot of progress and changes over the years. So my story actually dates back to when I was in about grade four. So we're going way, way, way back. And we had to do a hypothesis-based science experiment for a school project. And we could choose anything we wanted as long as it had a hypothesis. And what I was really interested in looking at was what people saw first. So I cut out different shapes and colors of construction paper and I posted them on a board. And I would ask people, what color do you see first? What shape do you see first? And far from statistically significant or scientifically valid, that's what I was really interested in testing. And I had no idea that that actually was my first eye tracking experiment. So fast forward many years later, and a very circuitous route that took me to do a bachelor in communication studies and a degree in graphic design, I actually ended up landing in doing a master's where I specialized in using eye tracking technology to see where people looked at ads. And everything came full circle when that happened. And I went, oh, wow, I had no idea there was such thing as eye tracking technology, but this is exactly what I've been trying to do all these years. So it really resonated and it revealed some really interesting findings. One of the things I focused on for my master's thesis was looking at message framing and if people are more attentive to gain framed, which is positive messages, or loss framed, which is negative message, and that loss aversion theory. And what I found was really interesting. People actually initially attend more to loss frame messages or messages that show you what you have to lose. But as they start to cognitively process it, and it goes through that second degree of cognitive processing where you're thinking about it, you actually stop. And people don't recall negative messages as much, and they're not able to remember what the message was because there's this kind of pushback. They don't want to actually accept it. So, although they do grab our attention, they don't actually fully resonate as well as game frame messages or positive messages. So, that was one of the findings out of my master's thesis. From my master's, I thought I would go into eye tracking technology, but there wasn't all that much of an appetite for it. The eye tracking industry is kind of petered out and it's gone more into heat mapping. But what I did end up doing is getting on with a local user experience firm, a UX firm, and doing large scale usability studies, primarily for the government of Canada, where I am. And as a training exercise to learn UX, one of my colleagues said to me at the time, there's this site called Which Test One, which, Mark, I think is how we met each other many, many, many years ago. And they said, get on Which Test One and start, learning some of the psychology and tricks behind it. So Which Test One was a site very similar to Guess the Test, and I'll tell you that story, where you got to guess which test you think won and then see the real life results. And I loved Which Test One, as did many people, yourself included, Mark. And I got on it and I used it for training myself doing these usability studies. Usability testing is interesting, it's neat, it's qualitative, and you don't always get as defined ideas or insights into how to make websites work. You get top task completion, and you can see if people actually are able to complete the task. And on government websites, at least in the government of Canada, it doesn't happen very often. But it was really, really interesting to understand how people use websites in that context. From there, at one point, Which Test One had a job posting for a key content creator, and I applied and got the job. So I went from the world of UX into the world of CRO and A/B testing. And I've since realized over the years that they're really two sides of the same coin, but they're markedly different in their approach. And I now work with Nielsen Norman Group and I deliver training. And I actually just recorded an A/B testing course on user experience for Nielsen Norman Group, who is the UX authority. And what I've realized in doing that is there's this wide divisive gap between UX and CRO, UX being qualitative and small sample sizes, and CRO and A/B testing being quantitative and large sample sizes. And the methodologies and the approaches and the thinking that goes on behind it is so far apart. And so I'm really now in the industry I'm in and my, stance in the world trying to bridge that gap to create this pathway between the two because they have such different approaches and one hates on the other and the other hates on and it just gets all over the place. So through my background in UX and then going into Which Test One, I was able to start to see that actually what you should be doing is not saying one is better than the other, but doing mixed methods approaches, combining the qualitative and quantitative, which is something actually obvious but very unique that I take into the work that I do with clients. Not a lot of practitioners are doing that. They're heavily relying on qualitative or heavily relying on quantitative, but not both. And so blending the two or doing triangulation or mixed methods is, I believe, absolutely the way to do it and a way to bridge that gap as well. I'll just fast forward through because I'm only at, part of the way through my career here. I worked for Which Does One for a number of years until unfortunately the site ended up being sold, rebranded, and dissolved completely. And I was a key content creator at the time, and it was heartbreaking to me. Many of the case studies that I had written were there, and it was a rich, rich repository of history dating back to case studies from 2009 when the web was just burgeoning and CRO was just developing. So it was devastating and heartbreaking to see this. And people were coming to me and saying, Deborah, what happened? I relied on these case studies for teaching my classes or for organizing my tests. What do I do? And so I decided to independently create a new version of Which Test One, which became the site that I founded and now run Guess the Test. And it's been going strong for about 7 years. In tandem with Guess the Test, I also actually apply the knowledge that I learn and derive from the case studies and put it into practical real life results for clients doing consulting work and A/B testing. So that's not so brief, but a 20-year history in 20 minutes. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, once again, there's so much so much in there to pull apart and really do a retrospect on. I mean, conversion rate optimization is a big deal, and we know that many companies are continually trying to experiment. I was just the other week, I logged into YouTube and they added a new feature that says, would you like to A/B test this title? So
No.
now they're really even giving these tools in the hands of just regular consumers in order to do that. So it's becoming more, prevalent, and we have to understand how that's all going to work. And you're doing wonderful work out there. I think the
Thank you.
information that you have is always timely. It helps make a lot of decisions if you're trying to understand which way to go. And that's why I wondered, when you're talking about bridging in there, bridging that gap, is that how you're starting to define user experience? Like, what would your definition of user experience be? And why do you think that's important?
Yeah, so it's important because, as I mentioned, there's this really divisive divide between it. And it actually became very apparent to me I mentioned I do consulting work and teaching for Nielsen Norman Group, the UX Authority. And one day I was mining through their articles. They have thousands of amazing high quality articles on their site, and you can access them all for free. And I saw a quote from the founder, one of the founders of Nielsen Norman Group, Nielsen, Jacob Nielsen himself. And it was a quote from about 2005 or so, early in the industry. And it said, A/B testing is not the answer. It's not going to get you what you need. It's not going to get you what you want. And he instead said, use qualitative testing. It's going to tell you the why. And you can use smaller sample sizes. And you can get quicker, more definitive evidence as to what's happening with your users. So, three very, very strong justifications. But the prime one that quantitative just doesn't do very well is it doesn't tell you the why. You can understand what is happening or where the issue is, but you don't know why. You really do have to talk to your users. And so I think articles like that and that kind of thinking set the industry off in this kind of divisiveness very early on, where
Mhm.
there was a forum of the qualitative camp that said, we're the best, we answer the why, we have low sample sizes, and we can do it pretty quickly. And then there was this other camp that started to emerge that said, well, actually, we're the best. We have large sample sizes that are statistically significant and we know what's happening, and we have the gold standard method of A/B testing. And so instead of pairing the two, which is ideally what one does, they just went off in their own directions. Now I'm speculating, and this is a hypothesis unto myself, but just kind of piecing together what I have seen evolve over the years. And in industry, as I mentioned, give a course for NNG, analytics and UX testing, and I'm attempting to bridge that gap with teaching the students. It's a course actually, Mark, you took. And one of the things that come up in it is that people inevitably say they're either doing qualitative or they're doing quantitative. And I always ask them, why is it that you're not doing both? Why don't you combine? And things like, we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough time, it's not valued. These things all come up. And so inevitably, practitioners tend to lean way more heavily on one modality or another without actually blending them together. And so I see it as my mission now, because I have that unique exposure of starting in UX and moving over to the dark side of CRO. I now have that perspective and the different approaches. And it's not one or the other, and it's not right versus wrong, or we're better at all. It's these two approaches are very different. Let's bring them together in a holistic way so that we get the full picture. We get the what, we get the where, and we get the why. So,
Like it. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, once again, you brought up some really good points about practitioners that we seem to lean one way or the other. I know a lot of times there's, oh, I use mixed methods, but are you really? Especially with the business needs. And then I've been seeing more and more specialized roles in these very specific camps. So I know it's important to understand and as a UX practitioner, understand both of those sides. One thing that I found interesting is in your intro, it sounded like you did a lot of adapting, a lot of changing through your career. Is there some mantra you hold or something you think about or how you approach change when it comes to
absolutely.
adaptation? Yeah.
I really internalize intrinsically the idea of optimization and continuous optimization. And I totally believe that one should live their life as an experiment. It makes it so that you take life less seriously when you get those hard knocks. And it makes it so that you can just approach things in a more open-minded and fun, jovial way. And so when you look at life as a way to continuously optimize oneself, your health, your well-being, your mental state, all of that, then you're constantly working and evolving, and it brings you to the optimal state where, you'll never achieve it maybe, but you're always trying to enhance yourself. And I really firmly believe that everybody should do that. In addition, if you take an experimentation mindset, then you're more open-minded to taking risks and to trying things, and you're not as fearful of things because it's an experiment. You're trying it and you're seeing how it goes for you. Those two things are directly as a result of the industry that I'm in, but I live, breathe them, and eat them every day. And so I really do, walk the talk.
I love that. Yeah, it's interesting because I approach it very similarly from an experiment. And I always tell people, go back to fourth grade, sixth grade, wherever they taught you that basic scientific method and apply that throughout your life. And it is something that you can apply not only to work, but then to your own personal life. And I love that. Right now, there seems to be a lot of buzz out there. You're probably familiar with the Gartner hype cycle of certain technologies. Is there something that you right now you're thinking about in an industry that you can't ignore, and then why?
Yeah, well, I think the big elephant in the room is AI. And it's unignorable at this point. It's changing how we work, how we operate, and very rapidly. And nobody quite knows the answer. But at least once a day, I have a panic attack and I go, oh my God, are there even going to be websites in, 2 years, 5 years? Is what I'm doing going to be completely irrelevant and unnecessary very quickly? And how can me and all the experimenters out there adapt and still, be relevant and keep a job? And, one of the reassuring parts is that AI, at least right now, still needs that human touch and the human overlook. We still need to basically treat AI as if it's like a first draft of something and edit it and make it our own. But as it evolves, as it has very quickly, we've seen the rapid progression from a year ago. Where are we going to stand in 2 to 3 years? And who are our users going to be? Are our users going to be people? Are they going to be agents? Are they going to be a combination or something else altogether that we haven't even kind of discovered yet? And how do we optimize websites for that? And are websites even going to be necessary? If a user, whether that's an agent or a person, can go into an internet kind of browser or a GPT or, some kind of system and have everything fed to them within Claude or ChatGTP, whatever it is, will they need to go externally to a website to buy something, to find more information? I'm not totally convinced about that. And so, what if the web becomes these hyper personalized structured data snippets that are fed directly to the user? And there's no such thing as websites anymore. They're just structured data snippets that are hyper personalized. How do we optimize for this? So these are the things that keep me up
Yeah.
at night. And I wish I could say I had answers. I don't. I'm rolling with the punches right now and, hoping that I can retire before it gets really drastic or that I'll be able to evolve quickly enough with wherever the industry is going.
I mean, you bring up some good points. I think what I've understood, and there's just been a lot of seminars, webinars, discussions about this that everyone is still learning, and there really isn't a lot of great standards out there with this or really to predict where it's going to go. But like you said, there's still humans that are connected. So I've talked to different people that said, well, this is actually going to increase our work because there all of a sudden there's going to be these very unauthentic uh, creations. So there's going to need some type of human in the mix. So
Right.
the question still is out there, Deborah. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure that out. And I
Yeah.
think that leads to my next question around where do you think people should put their efforts? Is there some advice you think you should give them when they're looking for a career change or following a similar path that you did?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a really tricky question. I did explore this. It was about a year ago, so times have changed. But there's essentially 5 to 8 kind of potential career paths that I think are still going to be relevant as we move forward in this. And, I think about this for my kids who are, one of them is in high school right now, and in a few years he'll be going to university. Is what he can do now even going to be relevant in 4 years? Is there going to be university programs that are going to train kids for the job market that is they're going to graduate into? I don't know. it's a scary time from that standpoint. I think we have to really see life as an experiment and be adaptable and continually optimize ourselves and our skill sets. So with that, I think there are a couple, at least right now, timestamp, 2026, April 2026, career paths that are viable for people. So number one, if you're technical, I think you're hands and legs above most people. You can go into specializing in structured data and JSON and any kind of language that these AIs are using to really understand. You can use, Claude Code, for example, and you can start to get the AI working for you in a way that's going to be optimizing the site, and you can be experimenting in that way. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, as we move into this new paradigm where you want not only an optimized website for a person, but also for an agent that reads and interprets the website in a much different structure and fashion than a person would. So, for example, social proof doesn't really mean anything necessarily to an agent. It has, as we know, a huge psychological effect on people, but reading a five-star review to an agent may not actually mean anything. However, in the way that it's ranked, in the trust and authority score that it creates, that kind of thing, and the placement of it, maybe that will affect an agent's and the ranking, and probably the bid price for advertising as well. I have a sense that there's going to be kind of a nefarious development in advertising where the highest ranking, highest bidding, hits are going to come into these AI browsers, and that's what we're going to see. I don't know if it's going to be the best development, but anyway, that's a whole other topic. However, if you're technical, structured data, JSON, I'd really focus there. If you're a copywriter or a content creator, I think you actually still have a job, but you need to be able to edit the AI better than it can write itself. So it's not just removing the M dashes and the short structured sentences that it repeats itself 5 times. It's about actually understanding the prose and proper grammatical structure and being able to make it sound human because you edit as the first draft what the AI has created and then turn it into something that truly is you. So people who can do that, I think will still have a job in the future. And another, I know I mentioned five, but I'm just going to give three for the sake of time. I think a huge, huge area is that there's a total need for governance of AI policies and data protection, privacy, and how AI is actually going to be used and utilized within organizations and structures and humans. We have all this backlash about cookies, for example, but cookies are small potatoes when it comes to the data and the privacy that these AIs are collecting on us. So anyone who's interested in that, I think there's enormous opportunity for governance and policy setting.
Yeah, great. Now you got me thinking about those other two there, Deborah. Like a cliffhanger. That's
There you go.
that
You'll
Zegaric
have to check
effect
out my
right there.
LinkedIn for
That's right.
that.
I'll have to do that. So I appreciate you being on the podcast. Great advice. I think there's a lot that we can dive into and even go deeper. But from anyone that's thinking about a career, I mean, your journey, thinking about that, just A/B testing itself really is something that is very interesting. And it's one element of user experience, but to show you can dive deep into that and build a whole career where your journey is giving light to other people to understand another path to go down. So really appreciate you sharing that today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And absolutely, A/B testing is a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver. And it took me a long time to understand, well, where does A/B testing sit relative to conversion rate optimization, CRO? And what I realized is CRO is that umbrella, the overarching thing you do, and A/B testing is a modality within it. It's a way that you can actually practice and implement conversion rate optimization, but it's just one component of it. However, it's a magical and very inspiring component, and you can definitely get into the rabbit hole of it, as I've done for my career. So,
Great. Well, if people wanted to find out more information about you, where would you direct them to?
yeah, so they can check out the A/B testing resource that I've created. Lots of free stuff on there. GuessTheTest.com. So, guess, Guess, the test. And there's hundreds of A/B test case studies on there, articles and resources, all meant to help you. And anyone is welcome to get in touch with questions anytime. And then I'm fairly active on LinkedIn as well. So Deborah O'Malley on LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect with you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Deborah.